Welcome back. Well, confirmation late last night that the director of the Buffalo City Infrastructure Department in Nxebe has been shot dead in what frankly looks like a hit. Nxebe was in charge of a large part of the city's infrastructure budget. It was the third time people had tried to kill him. Just a few moments ago, you saw President Cyril Ramaphosa answering questions in the National Council of Provinces about the construction mafia and how difficult it is for businesses to do their work when they are threatened. He said he would pass on complaints that police don't properly respond to these complaints. Dr. Jean Redpath is a senior researcher at the Africa Criminal Justice Reform Institute at the Dalla Omar Institute. Dr. Redpath, good afternoon to you. We see so many attacks like what we saw in Buffalo City last night. We see them in so many different places, but often an official will be in charge of a budget, they'll be doing a job, and then they'll be shot dead like this. Is this really just a fight over resources and contracts and who gets work and who gets money?
The extortion rackets have been around for a long time in South Africa, extortion in general. And I think this is an extension of those organized criminal networks, which often have their roots in gangs, but some don't, that has moved into legitimate businesses during the period of state capture, where another way for those organizations to get money was through quasi-legitimate means by getting contracts in the construction industry or threatening construction workers and other service providers to provide extortion payments in order to be able to carry out their work in those areas. And so this is a very, very serious development in our democracy, the extension of extortion in two ways, to actually overtake some of the work and in other ways to prevent people from doing the work that is needed in our most needy areas.
It seems to happen all over the place. I mean, again, this morning, reports of in Giyani, at the Giyani Water Project. This is a vital project. People need the water that it's supposed to bring, and people there being stopped from working by an organization that says it represents businesses in that area. We see it in KwaZulu-Natal, all the time. We see it in the Western Cape. In fact, there a provincial official was shot dead when she was someone who looked at construction permits. Is there no part of the country that's free from this?
Look, I don't think we can say that it's everywhere. It's everywhere where there is some money to be had. So if you're looking at a very depressed rural area where there's nothing much happening, extortion is highly unlikely to be a successful method in those areas. So it's where there is a significant amount of money already present, where a fee, an extortion fee on top of that, can be extracted. So there needs to be a functioning economy. There needs to be some degree of functioning businesses happening before extortion can actually take hold. And there needs to be a weakness in the protection and the enforcement provided by the state against that sort of thing happening. And I think that is where the gap has come during the period of state capture, where our criminal justice system, our policing system was infiltrated and became weak and allowed these networks to begin to get a foothold. And once they have a foothold, it's very, very difficult to remove them.
Does the link between this and politics go perhaps further than that? Are politicians involved in some cases, or how do I put this, political entities?
So certainly in some instances there is suspicion of that. In some instances there is actual evidence. There have been a few lower level prosecutions and convictions, but not not at the higher, more well-known level. So certainly it does extend to members of government in some instances, and officials working for the state who are not necessarily members of government, but they are officials working in the state. Sometimes they have no choice. Well, they are being threatened themselves, and so they are being extorted. So it's a very, very difficult scenario once this sort of thing takes hold, to eradicate it, because it's difficult to find out where it's all coming from.
I mean, I imagine it would require, and there was a call in Parliament from an opposition MP, I think from the Democratic Alliance just a few moments ago, asking the President, could we please have a specialised policing unit to deal with this? Also asking if we could actually have sort of specialised protection for witnesses. I can't imagine how scary, how dangerous it must be to testify against the people who do this.
Well, exactly, and I think that's one of the key problems is that in a democracy we need to amass the evidence and we need to bring people to book in order to extract them from the situation. The only other way of dealing with the situation is to provide a great deal of protection. I know that's one of the things the City of Cape Town is trying to do, is to use their law enforcement services to protect people trying to carry out services in dangerous areas. But that requires a great deal of investment and resources, and it's simply not sustainable in the long term. In the long term, one has to get the kingpins, the people in charge, the root of all the incidents, and that requires convictions in court. And for that, you need evidence, and often you need witnesses. And it's very, 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 very dangerous for people to testify in such matters.
I suppose the heart of this is that you have people with no job, no form of income, no prospect of a form of income, watching sometimes people coming from outside being involved in getting work that they could do. And so what you have is this almost a tinderbox situation. Someone's going to organize, and that's where the trouble starts.
I think that is a little bit of a sort of a mischaracterization. When we're talking about gangs and organized crime, we are not talking about people who are poor. We're talking about people who are highly aspirational, who want to wear good clothing and to drive nice cars, and that is actually the more common phenomenon is people who want easy money, and who want a lot of easy money. Certainly at the lower level, there might be instances of very poor people feeling like they're excluded from the opportunities. But very often such contracts do have local labor requirements and that sort of thing. So very often that is a sort of an easy excuse. The organized crime, make no mistake, those people are not poor, they are wealthy, and they're making a lot of money.
It feels almost, Dr. Redpath, and I realize a feeling is not rational, it's not something you can assess, but it feels sometimes like we're becoming, I hate this phrase, a mafia state.
Yeah, so I think one has to think closely about what it means to be a mafia state to decide whether we are there or not. And you know, one of the definitions is that a large part of your GDP, of your economy, is illicit in nature. And I think South Africa still has a very strong economy of legitimate sources of funding where we're not, we're not like Transnistria in the breakaway part of Moldova, where 30% of the economy is actually cigarette smuggling and gun running. That's not, we're not there yet. However, if we look at our ranking on the organized crime index and where we're going, those experts have ranked us as increasing in organized criminality, and I think that's correct. They've also said that there are government members who may be involved, as well as actors from outside the country. I think that is also correct. Where I think they're incorrect is they're ranking us as a deteriorating resilience. And I think that what we're seeing is a lag in the impact of the resilience rather than the resilience deteriorating. A number of initiatives since 2019 have been put in place, and it's just taking a bit of a long time to see the fruits of the labor in the data, in convictions in courts, in change actually happening on the ground. And when you have that resilience and that fight back, the level of violence actually rises. Because there's now contestation, because there's now perhaps a scarcity of the illicit resources. And so what we're seeing at the moment is a rise in murder figures, which indicates a rise in violence, And that's part of the picture when the initial phase is always going to be feel like things are getting worse before they get better.
So, very quickly, we're almost out of time, Dr. Redpath, but do you think there are reasons for hope?
So I think that there are reasons for hope. I think that there still could be more that we could do, that the state could do, and I think that we will get there if given the political will.
Dr. Jean Redpath, thank you. Senior Researcher at the Africa Criminal Justice Reform Project at the Dullah Omar Institute. Good to hear that there are some reasons for hope. In other news,